All right, we're going to get started here. Sorry we had a little bit of a delay because some audio routing issues. We should be all set now. All right, so we're now in part 3 of our learning EOS, and this was all about timecode. Again, another live stream. Thanks for joining us. It used to take me forever to edit things and make them perfect, and now I figured if I just go live and record and just go straight at it, it gets content out there faster. And something I learned that I like is it shows how people who have been doing this a long time can still make mistakes, and how we just kind of find the resources we need to get the right answers when things don't work the first time. Great humility in knowing that things aren't always perfect the first time, and that really how to find the right resources to get things going. So right now we're going to talk about hardware and the options available. And first, I think I'm going to jump back here. I've got several of these still that I use at different venues. These are the Ion Classics. And one thing they've got that's got, and they're not the only console, but none of the newer ones seem to have this, which is these MIDI ports here on the back. So if you've got older consoles, you'll find that you've got MIDI ports built in to facilitate timecode. But when we look at the newer ones, excuse me, none of the inputs and outputs include it. There's a lot of people that kind of grumbled about that, but I think the big reason is because now we're right here on just the main homepage of the products. If we go to network input and out devices, we've got these gateways. And so on the show control gateways, they come in two formats: the rack mount, fit to a rack, or these, I think they call them backpack style gateways. And these fit naturally straight into the back of the Apex console. There's what they call the I/O garage. So you can populate your console with exactly the I/O you need and none of the stuff that you don't. So let's take a look at those. And this is the MIDI one. So you've got your MIDI in, out, and through, as well as your USB port or Ethernet. And then this rack mount is exactly the same. And then here's the SMPTE response gateways. And the reality is that if you've got a physical console, it's one of these two methods or a legacy console.
So Scott, tell me about
a legacy console that has these ports for you. And this is how we get it in and out. And what I like about this and the shift away from including it is that so many shows I go to don't use any of this I/O, so that's just extra hardware. But now we can get the hardware we need. And the other benefit to using these devices is that they can sit on the network. So now when you're working in a multi-console environment, especially primary backup, that timecode gets to all the places that you need it. And instead of being physically limited to the console that you're physically sitting at. They've also got serial and analog I/O gateways. But for our purposes, we're looking at these two devices. And from my understanding, and if someone wants to correct me in the comments down below, I believe at the end of the day, if you're using the SMPTE, it actually behind the scenes gets converted to MIDI anyways. These are both ways of tracking linear time code coming into it. And one uses the MIDI protocol, the other one uses SMPTE. SMPTE comes over an analog line. It is called, a lot of people call it screeching pigs when you hear the sound code being made. So you never want to listen to it, but it's something the computers can understand just fine. And they both work very well. And so if you're working on a console, these are your options to come in. There is a third option we'll talk about in a moment, but these would be like the recommended and certainly the only way I would do a show if I've got a physical console. However, if I'm in a programming environment where I'm on a Nomad or I'm in an environment with a Nomad, so you're working on PC, a couple more options become available to you. Again, they get none of the benefits of the redundancy that the hardware devices give us. Also, if you're new to these gateways, there is no practical difference between the backpack style or the rack mount, purely as a form factor of what conveniently works for you. If you've got an installed environment, I would definitely go with the rack mount units. If I was in a traveling setup, where I didn't have a giant traveling rig. Say I was just bringing my Nomad and a device, I'd bring the backpack style, or again, these fit into the I/O garage of the Apex console. And from memory, you can get 4 in the I/O garage, so those work great. And those connect internally via USB. So let's go on to now if we're running on, let's take a look if I have a tab open yet. I don't. Okay. So when you're running on Nomad, again, all we have to do is get MIDI into the device. So literally any MIDI interface will work to get MIDI into a PC. I have heard of, but I have never experimented with taking an off-the-shelf MIDI interface and just connecting that right up to your console, having it auto-detect and bring MIDI in that way. I haven't tried it. I'm not sure I would. Again, I would stick with the gateways. I understand they are a little more expensive, but when it comes to support, and ETC has fantastic support, having this hardware just further enhances the stability and that we are going to get full support end-to-end because we're using their devices. Doesn't mean they won't help you if you've got third-party stuff, but that always becomes a lingering question. Let me open this up. So Scarlet 2i2, again, just on a general Google search page by Focusrite, is an interface I've used on a PC setup. And basic interface here, and then on the, oops, sorry, not the 2i2. What do I have here? The 4i4, that's right. So the 4i4 has the MIDI interfaces on the back. And so you've got MIDI in and out on the Focusrite 4i4, which also gives you MIDI and audio in and out. So that's a right way to get audio in and out. What we're doing here for the purposes of this demo is we're all doing it locally on the same computer. And we'll go through exactly how that works. One other product I'll just draw your attention to is this. I'm assuming it's DoreMIDI or DoreMIDI. And they've got these different interfaces. And this is the one that I use that works really, really well as well. So this works as a kind of a Swiss Army knife. This is what I have in my traveling Pelican for me. And this does several things. It's got LTC in and out. It also has USB and then MIDI in and out. And so this is kind of a Swiss Army knife. You can plug this in directly into your computer. It acts as a MIDI interface, but beyond working as a MIDI interface, it can also take timecode directly in. If you're working on a physical console, say you've got a legacy Ion, and it has MIDI interfaces but no SMPTE, this device will take your SMPTE in and then spit out MIDI that can go straight into your Ion or your other older console that has MIDI interfaces. So this is a great way to translate from MIDI to LTC and vice versa. And so really like this device. Again, kind of a Swiss Army knife for timecode. Affordable. I think you can get these off of Amazon, I think is where I've gotten mine. But this is another way to take your LTC timecode and turn it into MIDI to go into your console. Or again, if you're on Nomad, just straight into the PC. So those are great little boxes. And so those are kind of the 3 ways to get timecode into your console using the DoreMIDI. Again, whether it's to Nomad or as a translation device to MIDI to go to a legacy console. A Scarlet gives you the MIDI interface as well, but it also gives you additions of audio in and out. And then, of course, we've got our gateways here as well. So those are 3 ways to get audio or timecode in and out. Let's take a moment to talk about timecode. Timecode, again, for sake of arguments, MIDI is a discrete interface connector there. It's a 5-pin DIN. Usually you're going to be close to the source of your MIDI timecode generation, where SMPTE is an audio signal. You can run that over the audio snake from stage to front of house and out of the audio snake at front of house into the soundboard. SMPTE works just fine over all the digital, the analog to digital snake methods. So if, say, you're running Dante or your stage boxes are running MIDI or whatever they're doing in audio land, SMPTE travels over those just fine with high fidelity. And I've had no problem using those in production. And I guess the other thing I should say, what's nice about these is because these are network-based, you can physically just put these on the stage and then use your lighting network to get that back to the console. So you can literally just drop these wherever you need those interfaces to be. Another example, I've worked in Dante-based infrastructures. And so Dante makes these AVIO, if I can type correctly, interfaces. They look like this. And so not sponsored, but this is just the first Google search result here. These take Dante using the Dante network and spit out 2 channels of analog audio. I've used this, and then you can send that into 2 response gateways, for example. And so using that. So now that's how we get it into the console. The question is, how do we generate timecode? And so there's 2 places. Really, at the end of the day, we get timecode from the audio department, which is usually going to be the music director, the conductor, or again, just the sound department in general. And it's whoever's running or controlling timecode. Timecode for us usually is going to be, the way I use it generally, a song-based. So every song has a specific increment of time. I believe the Hamilton show was using timecode for all of their musical numbers, not necessarily the dramatic elements, but all of the songs that were played out that they're singing to the song. Everything was time coded out. And so you're getting that usually from the sound department. The conductor in a show like that would be triggering it. In a band or a house of worship environment, you have a music director that's triggering something. Places I see it come from, everything from Ableton to Pro Tools to whatever multi-track system they're using. They're going to have these. And basically, if I'm working on a show where they've got a guide, which is saying, hey, you're going to play songs in this arrangement, in this dynamic over time, and they've got a click track, and they're already set up for multi-track, I say, hey, can we drop in one more audio channel for SMPTE for timecode? And then now that system's spitting out timecode. We send it over analog lines into the lighting console. In our environment here, we're just going to use a on-PC software called Repere. That's what I do when I'm programming on my PC. This is what I've been doing for a little while. I'll also pull up another tool that I use in Mac land, and that is called Show Control. I'm sorry. Not Show Control. What am I thinking on? QPoints. There we are. QPoints. And here they have just added a Mac or a PC license, which I don't have on here. Might actually just try to do that really quick. But I use this on a Mac. Our Ableton computer is also Mac. The reason I use QPoints is it actually has the best shuttle control for going forward and backwards in timelines to sync that up. They do also have some other integration. I honestly haven't experimented with it where you can actually drop your time markers in here, import them into EOS, and use those as your cue points. Honestly, I haven't tried it. I might need to. You can see it exports seamlessly to all sorts of systems, including EOS and Hog, as well as MA and others. And so maybe I'll get that downloading just for fun. Again, haven't tried it on Windows. I've used it on the Mac. And I'm just going to slide that into another window. Okay, great. So we'll get that going. And while that's going, I'll show you one way to do it in Repere here. And so ultimately there's a couple ways to do it, and how I'll do it perhaps in programming is different than I might do it in a show. But let's start with sourcing a timecode file. Instead of having you learn like long URLs or copy paste, I'll just show you using Google search. So LTC time generator, and there's a website here. Wow, I'm surprised it's not showing up as the first result. Is this the actual site? Nope. Haha. Here it is. So here's the correct website, LTC, spelled out phonetically, I guess. And so this is a great one. It generates timecode files. So this generates the analog file that you can drop into something like Ableton or whatever else. For frame rate, I recommend 30 frames. Even though like 2997 non-drop frame is like a video SMPTE standard, I recommend 30 because 30 works out to be natural divisions of what how we tend to think of times as people. And then the sample rate will be based off the sample rate of whatever the rest of the project is they're doing in Ableton. I'll choose 48 kilohertz and 24 bits. And then the duration is however long in minutes you're going to need each segment to be. 10 is usually long enough for everything I'm doing because we're doing a different SMPTE timecode for every song by song. I don't have a song that goes more than 10 minutes in length. If you do, you can dial this up to any length you want, but I'll just leave this at 10 for now. And then here's the start time. And so one of the conventions I've worked with, most of the stuff I'm doing, I need less than 24 different time codes for any queued out segment. I do some dance recitals where we'll time code things out, and so I do need more than 23. But when I need less than 23, my convention is I use the hour. So 01, so the first hour represents the first song, 02 is the second song, 03 is the third song, 04 is the fourth song, and so forth. For dance recitals or things with high cue counts, I just did a production where we had 27 songs. So what we did is we went by increments of 10 minutes because, again, nothing exceeded 10 minutes in length. So I had hour 1, 10, or hour 1 straight, and then hour 1, 10 minutes, hour 1, 20 minutes, hour 1, 30 minutes, and so forth. But for right now, I'm just going to create one here. I'll generate the timecode here. It zips it up. I'll download it. And there we have it for now. And then what I'll do is I'll open up Repere here. And here's just an audio track that we're working with here. I've already brought this in. It is a royalty-free song that I just found. So here we go. Great. So if I was in Ableton or this was on the stage and this was being sourced from a different computer, what we would do is we'd bring that song in here. So let me go ahead and grab that file here real quick. Sorry about the screen going blank there. Let's go here. Here we are. Okay. So here, I'm going to go ahead and mute that audio track you just heard. And this is going to be pure timecode. It's going to sound awful. Warn you to turn your speakers down here. I'll start this in 3, 2, 1. Lots of noise. All right, and we're done with that. So we've stopped playback. As you can hear, super annoying. Depending on your audio setup and your audio routing, what you would do is you'd have your tracks go out like output 1 and 2, and LTC timecode going out track 3. Again, that's where that Scarlet 4i4 comes in handy, because you can send audio out 1 and 2, and out channel 3 can be your linear timecode that you then ingest into one of the boxes I described earlier. The other way you can do it is using MIDI. And so I can sit here and we'll get this set up. First of all, we're going to open up a program called loopMIDI here. And let's show you the website for that. So loopMIDI, I believe this is the Windows only. There is a way to do it on Mac. I haven't set it up. I'm not using Mac a whole lot. I use it occasionally. But on the Windows side, I think on the Mac, actually, you don't even need a tool like this. I think it can loop back natively. But loopMIDI by Tobias here, download it. It's a great application, works rock solid. Here it is when it installs and launches up. And then I'm going to add a new port name. And so I'm going to call this LTC for EOS. And I'm going to click add. And so that now presents as a new MIDI device. And so now when I come back into Repere, I can go into options and preferences. And then I can go to MIDI inputs, and you can actually see it already listed there as a device for inputs, and then for outputs, same thing. And then all I'm going to do is click enable here. You can actually see my focus right there too, so I can enable it to go out that port as well, but I'm going to send it out LTC for EOS, and the ID is 2. I'll click OK. And then under track here, insert, and then SMPTE LTC MTC timecode generator. And so just so you know, here actually, I'll delete this one, is that by default, it can actually, Repere in this case, can actually generate timecode all on its own. So now if we play this back, you'll hear the same thing. Warning, loud SMPTE timecode in, oops, let's mute this, in 3, 2, 1. And we're done with that. And so you can see that it generates that rather annoying sound as well. But what we can do here is we can right click on it, choose source properties, and then we can change it from LTC to MTC, MIDI timecode, frame rate of 30. And just as we showed before, I'm going to set the start time as 1 hour and click OK. And now I'm going to stretch that out to the same length as the audio track. Now I'm going to play this, and you should hear nothing. Perfect. We're not hearing anything come out there, which is exactly what we're looking for. And now if we unmute the audio. Excellent. That's doing exactly what we thought it should do. Let me try this again real quick. Just test one thing here for us. Okay, and so then the last thing you do is handle routing in here, and it's changed from the last version I had. There used to be an icon there, so let's see if I can find that real quick. Someone is screaming at the screen saying it's right there. Love it when they change between versions on this. I don't think this is routing correctly out of the gate, but we can try it. I'm going to set up the other end of this and show you what we see on this end. So within EOS, you're seeing I'm on version 333 build 10, which is the most recent as of today. Came out fairly recently. We're going to go into setup, and then under setup, I'm going to go to device settings. Under device settings, we're going to come down here to show control. And it doesn't show it, and I think it's because I added that MIDI interface after I launched it. So we're going to go ahead and close this out. And and go back in here in a second. So we'll close that. We'll open it up again. Setup, devices, show control. There we are. And so I'm going to, it says USB MIDI disabled on those ones. I'm going to disable it on the programming wing. And USB MIDI is disabled, so I need to enable it right there. We're going to disable those guys as well. So now it has it coming in. It's going to show a timecode source of 1. So that's setting this up correctly. Of course, this is only needed if you're using some sort of MIDI USB interface, or in this case, even the software-based one is showing up that way, as opposed to the local MIDI, which would be what you have on a physical, here it shows like the console or programming wing. But we're only going to enable that, and actually we're only going to leave it like that. And then from here, we'll open a new tab for show control, which is tab 11. And then in tab 11, I'm going to type in /enter, and we'll label that. And I'm going to call this MIDI LTC input. And then the type is SMPTE, which is if you're using a response gateway, but I'm going to click on type. And then down here, my bottom options, we're going to choose MIDI timecode because that's how we're coming in, and I'll press enter. Source is 1 because that lines up with what we chose. And then internal is off. External will turn on. And so you see that we have timecode there. And then we're going to come back in here. And this is what I'm curious. I don't know if Repere changed the way they're working. We'll see if that starts to roll timecode here when we play the track. Nope. Okay. So we still have a routing issue here. Always helps to qualify with a version number. Yeah. None of those look exactly right. And the catch too, let's do MIDI timecode, since MIDI also is used to send notes, which is often very, very different. Basic routing and Repere. Let's see if that's what we're looking for.
That.
Yeah, see, that's what I'm used to seeing, a routing bus like that. There we are. Okay. So there used to be a button there called routing, unless maybe is it just not? No, not sure why it's not showing, but it's that icon there for routes. This is the channel 3, which is where we've got the MIDI. I'll click on routes, and here we can choose our output hardware. So we'll choose that LTC for EOS. And now I fully expect that to work. So now we come down. And as you can see, we get timecode rolling right there, which is exactly what we're looking for. So great. Perfect. Okay, so now you've seen the setup kind of cradle to grave there as far as how we've set things up in Repere. Just took me a minute there with figuring out where they move that routing icon to. And so we'll set this aside. You saw the setup here. And again, the only difference would be I'll just do list 2 here, and I'll call this empty test. And within this test, you can leave that as empty. Again, we turn that on to external. The frames per second needs to match as well. And then with that now, and we'll give that a source number, and then we would bring our SMPTE in via a different source. Again, if we're setting up during response gateway, that would be different than if we were setting it up via MIDI. But functionally, once you get the audio into the system, they work identically the same. And then again, when I'm working with Ableton, often the rigs and setups that I've got, I don't have a way necessarily to get like the response gateway next to the computer. You could come straight out of the computer through a MIDI interface to send timecode. But more often than not, what I do is I generate a bunch of these timecode audio files through that website. I give it to the music director and say, okay, and we're agreeing on which time codes we're going to use for which songs or segments. And then we start, when we start getting the audio tracks from the band or talent, the time code lines up. So hopefully that explains well enough how we want to connect those two. So now from here, the next thing we're going to do is go about using that time code. So now we can clearly see we get time code coming into the system. I'm going to turn the audio down just a whole lot here because we don't necessarily need that to be very loud for what we're doing here. Okay, maybe just a little bit louder than that. Need to hear it. Okay, great. And so what you see is you saw a red blip there every once in a while. And what that shows you is the time code basically falling out of time. And depending on a number of factors, depends on how accurate that's going to be or how many frames you're going to drop occasionally. If I go into tab 11, let me stop audio playback here real quick. What you're going to see is these resync frames. And so what that tells you is the current frame is this, and it received a different frame than what it was expecting as the time rolled on. And so that just kind of gives you an idea that something's not stable in the time code realm. Could be, in this case, our loopback interface. It could be that the audio signal is too loud or too quiet for your interface to convert that over. So those are the things I would look for. One way to kind of smooth it out, it does come with a double-edged sword here, is to turn on internal as well. And so now watch when I play the track. So that's doing exactly what we think it should. And then when I pause the track, you see it turns red and it keeps going even though the track has stopped. And so what that does is internally, the system realizes that it's lost external, so it just fails over to internal just from where things left off. And then if we started to replay the track again, it jumps back to exactly the time code it is receiving. And so there is a double-edged sword to that. That way, if you lose time code's going to still keep going. The question is, do you still want it to take cues or not? And that's something you're going to learn the hard way, whether that's beneficial or not. In some environments, it works better than others. It also really depends on who you're working with and who's controlling the time code. The question is if they stop playing time code, is there a good reason for it, or is there a bad reason? Did we just lose time code for no good reason and the band is still doing what they're doing, so we still want to synchronize the way we want to? Or do we actually want to stop playback on our end and then take manual control over from there? So kind of a subjective thing. And I'll go ahead and turn our internal off, which stops the time code there. So the next thing we're going to do is we're actually going to open up a show file here. And this is just to give us something to work with so that we don't have to take time on this stream to build a rig. So let me show you what we're working with here. I'll move that back up. So we can close that page. We can close this. And so what we're going to use the Hamilton project here. So how we get there from the main product page here. At the top, you can click on US Home, which brings us here. And then from here, we can go down to learning resources. And we've got practice projects, which brings us to this page. And then in here, we've got the Hamilton project, which brings us to this page. Then you can download the project files and unzip them. And so we're using the show file called the Hamilton Programming Project Intro, which is a basic show file. And we're just going to set up the screen here just a little bit. I think let's do something like this. We'll bring augmented up over here. And we'll make that 2. We can close the diagnostic tab. So we've got our cue list here. We're going to clean this up just a little bit for the stuff that matters to what we're doing here. I'm going to hide all this information. We're going to bring labels up to the top, and I'm going to bring timecode up to the top. So now we've got this look, and we'll make timecode a little bit bigger and label a lot bigger. And then here's our stage. Great. And then this is our show control section. And I'm just going to record snapshot 1. So we've got this look that we're going to come back to every time. And then let's just make sure we set up show control again. This device setting should have stayed, which it did. So now under show control, I'll go 1/ enter. We're going to label it. We're going to call it MIDI timecode. And then our source here again, we're going to set back to MIDI timecode. We're going to turn external on. The first time, this is just the relevant or the valid times that this list is going to listen to. So I'm going to leave that open to the entire realm from 0 to 23, 59, 59, 29, and 30 frames. And so we are set up here. And then I should call out too that timecode is based off of frames. That's what the FPS, frames per second, is. And since we naturally think of things in 60 seconds, just as our natural division of time, so 30 works into that as well as being half of that. However, beyond that, what I tend to think of, and we'll go about this in a moment, which is I tend to think of time in tenths of a second. So I'm less likely to think that I need 30 seconds and half of 30, another half of a second. So I wouldn't think of that as like 30 seconds and what's that? I'm not sure. We don't actually use that as a word. We'd typically say I need 30.5 seconds or 5/10ths of a second or 500 milliseconds. Those are the terms that I think we typically think of as fractional seconds, not necessarily in frames. But since frames is half of that, it works pretty well. So we'll go through how I set up some time manipulation for that, but there's that. So I think what we'll do here, just to get started, is in the show file, we're going to go into live. And what I'm going to turn is on list 1. So I'll say, we'll come back down here to tab 11, event 1/, and I'm going to click on more softkeys and learn events. We'll create macros for these in just a moment. But you can see that external and we're learning. And now when I come back out into live, why are we disabled? It should be enabled. Just play timecode real quick here. Show control looks good. Maybe I'll just articulate that really quickly. That looks good. Is there another place we enable it? I can't remember. Let's take a look here. Show control. Haha. MIDI timecode. RX enabled. There we go. Okay. Something I usually have on that I don't even think about. So yeah, so under show control, MIDI timecode, obviously there's a place there for SMPTE as well if we have SMPTE coming in there. But we're going to bring it in here. Back into live. So now as I roll timecode, we should see it roll up there, which it does. Perfect. And then again, just the quick and dirty here, I'm going to just off screen, just so there's not too much on the screen. I'm just playing and stopping the audio. You can hear that. And so, excellent. So right now we've got, we'll go tab 11, 1/ enter, and then more soft keys learn. So now we see learning on the command line there. We see it up there as well. We'll go into live. So now we're kind of armed for learning timecode. We're sitting at Q out, and we're about to go into Q1. I'm going to play the track, and then track is not the right track for Hamilton, but this gives us something just to kind of write some or trigger some cues to. So here we go. So we'll go to Q0, or this is 0.5, ready Q 24, 24. And then ready Q30. Ready Q36. Take it. And ready Q190. Take it. Ready 90.01. Take it. All right, great. So super, super exciting, I know. So now we'll go back into tab 11, 1/ for our event, more soft keys, learn event, which takes learning off. Super important to remember to learn and unlearn those things, or turn learning on and off. We'll go back into live. We'll say go to Q out. Accidentally closed our augmented, so we'll throw that up here. And if you saw it was kind of laggy, this is on a very cheap computer setup. So we're going to set that to low, approximated, and I'll turn lights low here too. Okay, great. So what we've done now is we've learned timecode, and then your first question is going to be, well, we learned timecode, but that's blank. And so now what we've got to do is associate that timecode list to our cue list, and this is cosmetic only. Whether or not there's something in there, we will still trigger cues. So I'm going to say Q1/, and then more soft keys timecode, and I'm going to say 1 because we're associating it with event list 1, and press enter. And so now what you'll see is there's our timecode shown there. And I'll make this a little bigger in all regards there. And what you'll see here is timecode is being recorded for Q24, but for the part cues, it's not listed because obviously those all fire together. There's also no timecode recorded for the preset because, let me get that showing here. I'll get rid of clean that up a little bit. So you can see we've got a follow cue here. And since that follows directly in a 1 second follow into 2401, there is no time code to fire because it is being automatically taken. So we can see how those fall out. And now simply with that done, I can sit here and we'll replay this audio track here. So one of the catches that we're running into here is that they've got these execute macros, and those are recalling snapshots in this demo. And one of the catches with those snapshots is not only is it doing the setup on the screen, but it also keeps forcing the quality to high, and this computer that we're running it on just simply cannot support it. But that's okay. We can push through and work through that. But as you can see, it just played it back exactly the way we want it to, or the way we saw it, which is perfect. Let's take a moment here and clean up these snapshots before they, otherwise I know we're just going to keep fighting them. So I'm going to take this, move this over here, and set the options to low. And we'll do pass through. Record snapshot 3000, and then I'll take snapshot 3001. And again, we're gonna move that over here. Quality, low, pass through. Record snapshot 3001. Snapshot 3002. Low, pass through, record, snapshot, 3002. Let's see how far do they go? 3000. Let's take a look here for this section. So we go 303, let's see, for that section, yeah, so that's the last cue we're taking here. So 3,303, so let's grab snapshot 303. And we're also using snapshot 2995. Sorry about this, guys, but that's just the let's see, 2995 and then snapshot 2991. Basically, I didn't want to do any pre-show setup because what I didn't want is I want to make sure that you guys can fully repeat this without running into any struggles. So now if we do this again from the top, okay, so there we go. Wholly unimpressive, especially with the low settings. What a big difference that makes versus Ultra. But since we're here, there's Ultra, there's High, there's Medium, and there's Low, what we're running on. I think it works well enough just to see, because again, it's not about the light show. It's about working with timecode. So I think we can just leave that the way it is and call it good. So there we go. We have loaded a show. We've wired up time code, and now it's working. And so what's next? What else do I do from here? So what we're going to do here is we're going to build out some macros that I use for working with this. So let's go to the macro editor. And it looks like these are the only macros they included with the show file. So I'm going to start with macro 10, and I'm going to call this timecode learn. And then from here, I'm going to go edit, and then we're going to go Shift Y and type in event. And I'm going to say 1/. And so we want learn. So Shift Y for shift about, and learn events. And I want this discrete, so I want this enable. And then there we go. And then I'm going to copy to 11. I'll just call that learn off. Go in and we'll change this discretely to disable. And then delete that. And so now what you'll see is if I go macro 10, you see learning has now turned on. And if I go macro 11, learning is now off. And then what I'll typically do for these is 10 through 11. These are things I'll throw into the background. I don't want it interacting with my command line. I want that to happen behind the scenes. And then for 10 and 11, I'm also going to turn off for SC learn, for show control learn. I don't want those accidentally getting learned into timecode either. So we're going to do that. Now what I'm going to do is I'll do a macro 20, and we're going to call this, I just use timecode a lot, timecode 1, I'll just call this enable for right now. And we'll go in here, about event 1/, and then we're going to go external and then enable, and then that's that, and then we'll copy that to 21, and we're going to label that one timecode 1 disable, and again 20 through 21, set those to background, oops, and we're going to make sure we're disabled there as well. And so now macro 20 turns on timecode, 21 turns it off. Why are we not turning off? I thought that's the syntax. Let's take a look here. Event 1, external enable. I'm pretty sure that's what it is. Let's go tab 11. And if I click here and I go event 1, external disable, I'm pretty sure that works in the background. Oh, yeah. Silly typo. We copied it, but we didn't change that syntax. There we go. Let's disable that. Go back into lights, and now macro 21 turns our timecode off. Macro 20 turns it on. And there we go. So we've just programmed some basic macros for turning on and off timecode, as well as learning and unlearning timecode. So those are super helpful. And so the other thing I'll do is I'll think of it in times of adjustment. So now what we'll do is I'm going to go macro 100 label, and we're going to say timecode plus 100 milliseconds. And so in here, let's see if I remember the correct syntax for this. So if I remember correct, it's Q, execute, timecode. Ooh, look, there's 2 in there now. What's the difference? Oh, I don't know what that does. That's a good support question to ask. We'll delete that out. And then to add timecode, I'm just you're not gonna do 100 because that would add 1 second. What I need to add is, this is kind of where the mathing comes in. 100 milliseconds is equivalent to 3 frames. So I'm gonna add 3 frames here. And then I'll copy, and we're gonna maybe make the opposite at macro 200. So we'll label that, this will be minus 100. And I'm gonna go edit. And to remove time, just as in most things, you need to go plus and then minus to subtract. And then we'll see if this does what I think it's supposed to do. And I also believe that these both actually can work in background. And we'll disable time, show control learn. So now that we're in the show file, I'll go to the PSD, and I'm going to just come up to this time here. We'll do it on this one. So if I go macro 100, nope, I think it does need to be in background, or either that or I've got my syntax wrong. So let's try throwing you into foreground. And then macro 100. Okay. Oh, you know what? It's probably as simple as macro. I'm not terminating the lines. So terminate that. Yep. And then edit this. And oops, typo. There we are. And now I bet you these also do work in background. Let's give that a try. So back out in live, macro 100. Perfect, yeah. So those do work in background. I try to push everything into background in my macros unless it explicitly needs to be interactive with your command line. So now I can increment and decrement by 1/100th of a second or 0.1, depending on how you want to look at that. In general, that's the smallest I need to modify things, but of course you could go to a frame. 1 frame, because it's 30th. It's 1/30th is not a nice number. That would be plus or minus 0.33 milliseconds. And for almost everything I'm doing, 100 milliseconds is enough resolution. But right now I'll copy to macro 101. And from here, my normal increments are 500 milliseconds. And then I'll copy that to 102. And then this becomes 1 second. And then we'll copy to 103. And now that becomes 5 seconds. And then as far as our timecode modifiers, this now becomes 500 milliseconds is 5 times 3, which is 15, which is also half of the 30 frames that there are. Hopefully that math makes sense to you as well. And then 1 second is plainly just 100. And then 5 seconds is 500. Oops. There we are. Did I accidentally? No. Okay. So great. So there's our adding. So I'll take 101 through 103, and we'll copy to 201. And then now I'll have to go to 201, label. Let's fix these to make it minus. Great. And then again, we have to edit these to be plus minus. And that's because in most cases, a minus value is valid. There's no such thing as negative time code. But as far as we are being consistent throughout the entire system, fixtures can pan to a negative position. And so a negative value is an actual valid number. So in order to say that we want to decrement, we go plus, minus on everything. And so now we've got these available to us. So we'll go back to snapshot 1. And so now I can go macro 101, which adds, let's try it again. So you see we're at 4902, and now we're at 4917, which added 15 frames. If we go 102, so macro 102, from 4917 to 5017, because that added a whole second, and then 103 adds 5 seconds to time. And so that allows us to nudge things either direction. Ways you could do this, for example, what you may decide that you want to do is we may want to just over here, we might add some custom direct selects, and we'll make them, let's see. Yeah, maybe something like maybe 2 rows of, and then we can grab our macros and we can go 100. Oops. Haha. Let's build this first. That darn escape key gets me every time. So macros 100 through 103, offset 1, apply, and then we'll go 200 through 203, hit here, and apply. And so now back out in snapshot 1, we'll go here, add this, we'll add our custom direct selects, custom, and I actually, here, started to overwrite something that was part of the base show file. Let's see, 2 rows by 4, is it? There we are. Great. Record snapshot 1. Great. So now what we've got is, now I can take that time code and add or subtract anything from it. On an Apex console, these might have these targeted to the physical direct select OLED screens. How I'm often doing it is I'm using a Stream Deck. If you're not familiar with those, I love those. If you don't have an Apex console, and their new wonderful sidecar is a little spendy for you, which, don't get me wrong, I love the product because it seamlessly integrates all your titles. And let's see, Stream Deck. Okay, Stream Deck, Elgato Stream Decks. You can kind of see some of the pricing there. They make different sizes. The XL is the one I have. It goes for $250-ish. And here it is. Connects to a PC. The software then that everybody loads on top of that isn't the native software, but it's from BitFocus. Companion, right here. And so this runs on your computer, but connects to the Stream Deck. The good news is it becomes a physical tactile thing. My ability to push a button and basically hit macros is fantastic. I really like it. The downside to it is that there is currently no synchronization between the two. And so what ends up happening is you have to manually synchronize all your labeling and everything. So not a lot of fun. Far better to have it on physical hardware when you can afford it. Because again, on those OLED target screens, I've made it here and it lives here and it looks like exactly like this. With the Stream Deck, now I've got to duplicate everything and create those buttons over there. Let's see. Bear with me 1 second here. Nope. Okay. I wasn't sure if I had that running on this computer or not. I do have another video that goes through that setup and how I have that working in other environments using a Stream Deck. But at the end of the day, what we're working with here is targets that are physical. I'm going to just update the snapshot really quickly. So that's how I manipulate time. That's how I start and end time code for an event. Let's see, what else can I share here about time? There is a thing to realize. I do often in some venues have a special time code offset here, because what can happen depending on your environment, how things are set up, and how tight your synchronizations are. If you're listening to close speakers or headphones when you're doing your programming, there's zero sound delay, right? So the moment the track hits it is the moment you hear it. But the reality is in most of our spaces, there's distance between the speakers and our audience. And this is always a thing, like when you're trying to synchronize hard hits and you're in a large venue. I'm routinely in a venue that's either 15 or 1,800 the patrons in the venues. Those are the two main venues I do lighting for, and both with balconies. And depending on where you are, whether you're in the front or in the back, there is a different delay by the time the sound gets to you. And then I used to, back in the 90s, I used to do a bunch of stadium shows and stadiums and arenas. And there you have huge delays between the front and the back. And so you do have to choose an amount of delay that you're going to plan for. Otherwise, it looks like your lights are hitting ahead of the beat. And so in most of my venues, my offset is about 63 milliseconds is the one I'm aiming for. But of course, you can't get 63 milliseconds when you're only going by frames. And so in some of my venues, I'll have a plus and minus 66 milliseconds, because that's that's 2 frames in time code. And so what I'll do is I'll time code out everything, and then you can select all your cues. And that's the great thing here is I can go in blind. So while I'm blind, I can go, what was our highest cue? So we can go, make those a little bigger there, to 190 point. So I can go Q 0.5 through 190.01. So that grabs all of my cues. And these increments and decrements still work across all of those. Oh, they should work. That's the way I normally do it. Is that a situation where we do need them to be in foreground? One of the catches you when you set up your macros and you copy them show to show, sometimes you don't remember exactly how you built them. So I apologize. So now if I go Q.5 through 190.01, and now that's still only doing the 1. Why? So we've got all of those. We're in blind. Do I not? Oh, you know what? I bet you I don't need. We're going to just try this on O. I'm going to delete Q rather. So if I just leave execute in there, and let's leave that in background. Let's see if that does what I'm anticipating. Q. The joys of live stream and unscripted. Okay, so now we've got all those. So not working in background, which I think makes sense. So let's force it to foreground. Tab 2. Q105 through, there we are. Okay. Sorry about that, guys. My mistake. Let's just bring this up here so we've got a full screen to work with. And so we do need foreground, which I guess when I think about it, makes sense because we're interacting with the fact that that the current console is set in blind, and those current cues are selected. And then thinking through it, it makes sense that by re-executing cue, I'm just grabbing the current cue, when really what I want to do is just do an execute timecode on all of them. So here's the cleanup. And if you were some person that just watched that part of it earlier, you might capture the wrong set of macros. Man alive, I'm struggling with typing today, apparently. There we are. Okay. All right, so we're in blind. On the PST, we're going to grab Q 0.5 through and 190.01. That grabs all those relevant cues. And now I can increment and decrement those all properly. And so one final time, here's the macros for those, execute timecode, and then the time. We want to run those in foreground, but the show control learn is disabled. The last thing you want to do is be in the middle of learning timecode and then accidentally be also recording these sorts of commands into your timecode. I think you can imagine how problematic those can be. Also seeing that the snapshot recall macros are not learned or not set to learn enable, we're going to go look at timecode, so tab 11. Good, because we weren't triggering those directly. They were side effects of the cues. Those weren't being captured. But here in tab 11 show control, we can see event list and then the events. Those are the times the action being taken is firing these cues. You could label them if you wanted to or not. Something that is a feature request that doesn't exist currently is while you could do something like in QQ, I can go Q1/. Oh, you can't either. I thought you could. In any event, you can't do like event list 1/ through something else. So I can't grab a bunch of event lists in action upon them. I can only grab the event list one at a time. You can grab multiple events. So I can grab event 1 through 4 as well. And I've never actually tried these macros here. And they don't work. In fact, what they do is they overwrite the action there. So thinking about that, I've probably tried that now that I think about it. Because the way we're screen recording, I'm recording a fraction of the screen. I'm not going to use the pop-up keyboard. I'm going to use it on a tab here. Since I'm usually using a surface interface, I remember a third of these commands by memory, but undo I always forget. So let's do that. So I'm going to do Control X for undo, and we're going to undo those last two, which gets us back to where we need to be for those cues. Fun little thought here, in case you didn't know, if you've been can't work with this show file since it requires version 3.0 or newer, but undo now, I believe it since 3.1, now persists through saves. So that's super handy. Also important to note here about show control, these event list numbers are not static. They are very different than cues. They will auto renumber themselves. So if I come down here into event 3, that's right, the command syntax here is different. So instead of execute, which is why it's changing the action, if I do event list 3 and then I hit time, I can set a new time here. So if I set the time here to 01000823, And it automatically puts in the colons there for you automatically. And when I press enter, you see that Q30 now shifts up and the event number automatically renumbers. And so just know that you cannot, those numbers are immutable. They will change. They're not static. And so you should not do much that relates to grabbing individual event numbers in this form, because those are going to automatically renumber based off of this. I believe it wasn't until 3.3 that this actually was fixed. Prior to 3.3, there was some weirdness. You can end up with gaps. You can get things out of sequence in here. They'd play back just fine. But when looking at the show control list, they wouldn't list in order. You'd get some weirdness. There's still one or two open bug reports about this as far as but I'll call it is purely cosmetic. It doesn't change the functionality. Timecode works just perfectly fine. Another weirdness that there is a feature request in, it's borderline a bug. But when you're working in with your show files, and I come in here and I do a merge, for example, and I'm going to merge from, say, a different show file, and I go to advanced and I go into show control. Even though these are show control event lists, you cannot import lists or set a target list, but what is labeled as start and target, those are actually your event lists. So if I bring in an event list 1, and I use a start of 1, an end of 1, and a target of 1, that's bringing in event list 1, not event 1. So in my world, show control here should actually, when you're doing a selective merge, these should be the one you should set the lists here, and those should be grayed out. There's an open report about that. And for the ETC folks listening to this, maybe we want to change that. Or I could be completely wrong, and there could be some other completely different rationale as opposed to why we want to present it this way. But in my mind, those are lists. And that actually was born out of the fact that I was going to put in a feature request asking, hey, I want to be able to merge in lists, not just events. But the reality is after testing, those are actually the lists for show control. So there you have that. Let's see, what else do we have here? Timecode. Important thing to know is that timecode is linear. In SMPTE, it's called LTC. LTC stands for linear timecode. And it's meaning that we're starting at 0 and progressing forward in a logical manner. We're going one frame after another. Sometimes we'll skip hours, and we'll use that for different songs. If I was doing Hamilton, that's exactly what I would do, is each major song would have its own hour as we progress through the show. But we would stop timecode. We wouldn't learn timecode events for those non-musical, highly synchronized moments. We would leave everything that, especially when we're looking at productions where there's human variability, which is a lot of them, which is why I got into live entertainment. Those are the keys we want to take manually. But once we get into a highly synchronized dance routine or number like that, where there isn't necessarily human variability, we're performing it to a click track. For better or worse, we're performing that musical number exactly the same night after night after night. That's where timecode really comes in and shines as well. And it opens up some new things for the designers to do hits that just could not be called perfect enough by a human stage manager who's calling cues. Although, total props, I've worked with some amazing stage managers over the years that have been called some tight cues that I didn't think were going to be possible, and they do some amazing stuff. But that's a place where timecode can come in and help. But it is linear, and so the point I want to make with that is that it is expecting to go in order, and it's going to play back in that order. Let's bring this up towards the front here. But what can also happen is that I told you about how timecode can skip a beat, if you will. And so it can skip over. If it happened to miss frame 23, it might be sitting in Q2401, and then not hear that specific tick, and then it jumps, and then it won't take the next cue until here, which might skip over a bunch of stuff that actually matters to us. And so one of the things that we can use to kind of salvage that is that's where using internal time code works, so that if external skips a beat, internal just picks up where it left off and keeps going. It still doesn't totally solve it for when time code itself is skipping ahead or skipping backwards on its own, but that can help smooth things out just a little bit. And if I was in an environment, I'd have a couple extra macros for that to perhaps enable or disable that. But something new that just came out, and this came out in 3.3.3. So let's get back to snapshot 1 here. And I'm going to just make a little bit of adjustment here. We're going to move that over like that. And we're going to move that down just a little bit. There we are. And we're going to record snapshot 1 just to kind of keep this look here. Let's actually open that up and record snapshot 1. Okay, so I'm going to turn off internal for a moment, so that way we just have external. And so right now what I'm going to do is we're going to turn off timecode here. I'm going to move timecode. Let's see, how do we want to do this? Yeah, we can leave it on. I'm going to jump our time back. And so I've jumped back into, I've played some time code and I've paused it. That's just for argument's sake. And so now you see we're sitting at time hour 1, 7 seconds. And we're sitting in this queue, which is totally the wrong queue. We really should be still back here in queue 0.5 because we haven't even gotten to 10 yet, but we're sitting in the wrong queue. And so a new command that just became available is go to queue. And then down here in softkeys, there's timecode. And as soon as I hit this, it's going to go to queue 0.5, which is the queue immediately preceding that timecode in the time of whatever your go-to is set to. So if I look in here into settings, and because this is the sample show file, I didn't set these timings. Default queue timings are there, and then when we come to manual timings, we can see go to queue time is 2 seconds. So now when we look at this, that should go in a queue time of 0, but if I say go to queue, actually let's go to a different queue, so we're at least out of it. Go to queue, timecode. Now watch, it goes in a 2-second time. Unfortunately, the wonderful snapshot is changing, pulling focus elsewhere. And maybe what we should do on these, those are only changing views, right? So maybe for the sake of this example, we'll take this queue through and let's just get rid of those executes. Probably a better quality of life thing I should have done earlier. So this will leave us stuck in this view for better or worse. But I think for what we're doing, that's actually preferable. Okay, let me record snapshot 1 again. So we're going to go to next, and then when I say go to, more soft keys, timecode, it goes in a time of 2. Well, I don't want it to go in a time of 2, perhaps. And so we have, of course, other modifiers. So I can say go to queue, timecode time, and now it will go in the time of that queue, which is 0, so it's a blackout. Also, what we'll do here, I'm going to jump ahead a little bit in the timecode. So now we're sitting there at 12. And let's go back here. So now at 12 seconds and 10 frames, we should be sitting here. So again, go to timecode. And if I just do that, it's going to go in the time of 2, which again isn't the time we want, but it also won't take the follow cue as well. So again, if we do GoTo Timecode time, it will go both, it will respect all the timing aspects of what we're going into. It's not going to use the GoTo time, it's going to use the cue timing. So it takes that in the appropriate time, it does the follow, and it takes the appropriate timing for that. And so in my setups, what I've got is I've got a macro. Let's see. We'll go in the macro of 300, and I'm going to call this, actually, let's put this, why don't we go at 3? Why not? This is the term I use by my own conventions. Not everybody is going to use this. I'm going to make sure I have a clear command line. This I probably am going to do in live because I want it to interact with the user who's controlling it. I don't want it to just happen in the background. So this will be an intentional foreground cue. In fact, that's a good note. Just anytime you're programming, just think, okay, from the start, before I start programming, what's the mode, foreground, background, and what do I need to do with the command line? So in this case, I'm clearing it. I'm going to say go to cue, and then I'm going to search for time code, and then time, enter, and then we'll save that. And so now when we're back here, if I go macro 3, timecode syntax error. Why is that? I just set this up at another venue. Doesn't happen to be this other time code, does it? Oh. And we'll make sure that's in foreground and show control is disabled. Haha. So, yeah, so apparently that appears to be the right one. So a good message I've got to bring in, which is clearly delineating between timecode and timecode underscore. I do know in the release notes for 333, there was an indication about making some consistency changes because in some places it used timecode as a single word, and in other places timecode with a space in between. And this looks to be some sort of remnant of that changeover, which is why when we search, they're both labeled timecode. In fact, just out of curiosity, I'll let you learn with me. I'm curious down here under soft keys. There's only one time code here. So just kind of curious to see if there's more than one or not. Yeah, interesting. Yep, 2 right there. Something to take away and learn about, and inquire what the difference is between those two. My guess is when I made that macro, I think it was before they did that cleanup, so it's possible that's why it works properly. But here we go, macro 3 brings us exactly where we want to go. And so one of the things you would see in my show file here, in fact, let's just do this. Or maybe this. Yeah, how about that? So here I'll do macros 1 through 3, and we'll put that here. Did I not label macro 1 and 2? Oh, I labeled them 10 and 11. That's why. No problem. All right. So, there we go. Timecode learn off, and timecode catch up. The other one I'll do, and I'll program in here, is for. So timecode silence is another one that I'll use, and so here we are. Oops. Event 1/ silent mode, and then again, I'm always using discrete here, so enable, and then we'll copy that to 5. We'll call that listen, and we'll change that to the disable, and then we'll come back here to our direct selects. Macros 4, 5. And actually, oh, that channel's macros. Great. And so now if we come back out here, I guess I lost this layout. So let's fix that. Throw that over there. Do a little bit like this. That looks good. That looks good. Snapshot 1, here we go. All right, so now from here, when we're going through this, I can go silent. And so what silent does is it still sees and receives timecode, but it's not going to act upon it. And then I can, for example, hit timecode catch up, which will bring me to where I need to be, but I'm still in silent mode. So I can go back to timecode listen. And so now listen will track along and follow, and learn and unlearn there. And then the other thing that we're missing, for example, is, let's see, where did we make those macros? Enable and disable, so 20 and 21. So if I go macro 20, oops. Great. So again, play the track over. So I can disable a timecode. And the problem with disabling it is now it's not even listening to it. So I don't even see where we're at, and there we'll enable it. So we can see where we're at. So silent and learn, or silent and listen, are similar in the fact that what silent does is it allows us to still listen to the timecode, but we're not acting upon the timecode. Listen now acts upon it, where timecode enable and disable is actually enabling and disabling your ability to even look at it. So these here is probably the bulk of the timecode cues. I also would simply, to round out this box, I'd probably throw in something there that just deletes the timecode from the current cue that's selected, because sometimes we'll need to blow that away. And then the only thing we're not showing here, and this is super dependent on your playback system, but obviously you could create macros with relevant OSC commands that will trigger qlab or Repere or CuePoints or whatever for playing back your audio. And so, for example, if you were to look at one of the places I program the most, we'll have 4 tracks because that's often what we've got: track 1, 2, 3, and 4. So that cues and plays those tracks. I've got a start and a stop. I've got a restart, so it basically restarts it from the beginning of the track and plays forward. I can pause, play, and stop. And then I've got a series very similar to this where I can bump forward and backwards in time. And my moving backwards and forth in time is usually 3 seconds, 5 seconds, 10 seconds. Those are usually the increments I'm working on. I only need to jump back and listen to that. I'm not jumping back minutes of a song. I'm usually jumping back to just get the timings right or watch that sequence play out. And that could be the timing for either the timecode timing or perhaps the cue time itself. And so those are the sorts of things I'll have programmed in for timecode. Other notes, let's see, what else? Some miscellaneous things. Just a reminder, timecode when coming through SMPTE can take up to 1 second, 1 full second for it to lock onto that time. I think all the official documentation on anything I've seen anywhere says don't count timecode reliable before 1 second. So as you see here, our first cue is taken at 1 second and 21 frames. However, if I go to that cue and I dial this down to something like 21 seconds, I would not necessarily count on the fact of being able to trigger that cue. So if we play this now, let's see what happens. And the reason why it's working here is because it's not LTC, it's MIDI, and MIDI does have a faster pickup than LTC. So that's something to realize, that if you need something that tight, to go for that. Other options to ways to work around it, we'll actually do a pre-roll on time. So sometimes it's not uncommon that we might actually offset the SMPTE track a second ahead of the actual track that the band or talent is going to use. And so we kind of get that pre-roll to lock or sync our clocks in. MIDI is a little faster. That being said, in most of my environments, even though official documentation might say 1 second, and who am I to disagree? But I find 20 or 21 frames to be sufficient over 99% of the time. The number of false cues I get when I've got it at 20 or 21 set frames is very, 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 very few. So I do almost all of my shows starting at 20, 21 frames, and that works and is accurate, and I can get the pickup cue for that for lighting. But if you were in a thing where literally at 0 you need to start, you probably need to have a pre-roll of some sort. The reality is a band can't pick up that fast. A band needs some sort of count in or lead in or enough to hear the click track for what they're following to, if you're talking highly synchronized. So even on those, like bands doing pre-roll is not surprising. The downbeat of a song is not at play. It usually is after some sort of count in, which is usually more than a second. So just know that if you're setting your time codes below 1 second into a new time code, you'll want to adjust that to at least be 21 frames. I think on paper it's 1 second. The SSL sound console I use in one of our venues needs a minimum of 1 second. And I've been telling our audio guy to be setting his time codes to be over like a second and 10 frames into it. And again, more than sufficient for most of the audio scenes that they're taking. That follow time code anyways is sufficient. Let's see, what else? Miscellaneous things about time code. Diagnostic tab can be your friend. Tab 99 will show you everything from resync. And resync, again, is it's received a frame out of the order that it was expecting it. And you also will show things like cue ran out of order. It will show you that a cue executed and here execute time code. And so Diagnostic tab always has tons of useful, helpful information in there. What else would I be training someone about timecode or gotchas? I would say that at the end of a timecode programming session, or especially when you're starting off and doing it for the first time, tab 11. Let's bring up tab 11 over here. Sorry. Show control here. Scroll through your actions. Make sure they're all cues. Since most things are going to be linear, make sure that they're incrementing all the way along the line as well. Make sure there's nothing unexpected. What can happen is you can accidentally record a macro in there. If we go back to macros, we can see like our timecode listen and silent are not disabled. Could you imagine the problems you could get in as if those accidentally got learned in to your show? I've seen so many people get into trouble because show control learn wasn't off for their macros. Again, in some cases, you might want to show control some macro events into timecode and into show control. So that's fine. But just make sure that when I'm looking through this list, nothing is outside of a cue is something I specifically want to have learned in. You can see when I click on macro, options are cue, in show control, going a little too fast. My actions can be things like cues or macros, which we've talked about, but it also can be things about submasters, faders, and level address. And so there are additional things you can learn in. But I'm going to say most of it, like 99% of it is a cue. Occasionally it's a macro. Most of my submaster or fader works are actually macros triggered within a cue itself because I want them associated primarily to the cue, not to timecode. But I certainly can see environments where you might want to actually learn those in as part of your show control. Go back to snapshot 1. For timecode, that's it. There's a bunch more on show control. There's been some addition to show control about how we can use MIDI to control faders or submasters. That's kind of cool. But that's outside of the scope of timecode itself. Timecode labels. I guess I would say on our frames here, timecode accepts all the SMPTE standards for at least for LTC. MIDI is very similar in that it has frames per second. I would suggest that regardless of where you are in the world, unless we're like timecode syncing for video graphics, I would keep my frames per second always to 60, always to 30, regardless of where I'm playing back from, largely because that is the way those fall into natural logical divisions of time for us as people, as opposed to a 24 frames per second or 25 frames per second or 50 frames per second. Just doesn't divide up cleanly into time the way I think most people think of. Maybe this is just a North America thing, thinking about fractional seconds as being tenths or hundredths of a second. Maybe somewhere else in the world they perceive time differently. But to me, I think the most natural way to think of adding or subtracting time in fractional seconds comes down to like 100 milliseconds or a tenth of a second or half of a second, right? And as a computer programmer, I think of milliseconds, but you could just as easily label this as half second and tenth of a second if those numbers work better for the way you think. But you just simply don't get to a tenth of a second very cleanly with 24 frames or 15 frames or anything else like that. And certainly not with 2997 drop frame video standards. So hopefully we've gone on for almost 2 hours, hour 45 right now. yeah, other questions, drop them in the comments. If I see anything, I'll get to them, or I'll reply to those later. I've got a meeting to get to here. And there you can see our clock up the top. Like, this is honest live stream. Like, that clock's just been ticking away every second, for better or worse. I blacked out the screen once or twice just as we switched applications or whatnot. But I think that's everything. Timecode is a great tool to use with the system. And again, all sorts of different ways to trigger it. I've used just about all of them depending on the environment I'm in. Again, I can't recommend something like the Stream Deck enough, just because it gives you tactile target keys that are just a far easier way to trigger your macros. If you've got a touchscreen, love touchscreens, I have touchscreens, you could certainly build something out like this that you're touching targets, but you just don't rest your finger on a touchscreen very well. You can't hover. Hovering is very different than resting your finger on a physical button. Of course, if you've got consoles like GOs or TIs or stuff where you've got physical macro target buttons, those work excellent as well. The new Apex consoles, man, I love when I get to spend time on that. And just having, again, physical OLED target keys that pick up the labeling here perfectly. That's great. The 1,500 seat venue I do work for has one of those. And so that's been a lot of fun to work with that and just work with the layouts on that. The only thing I wish sometimes was that at least one of the sets of the OLEDs had side by side. So just like what we had on the GO and the TI in the original EOS console, having paired target keys is helpful, because when I look at the Apex, as nice as it is, when you've only got, let's see, that was they were showing the FP, which is really cool. Thank you guys at ETC for coming up with that. But there's only a single row of OLEDs, versus when I go back and I look at the older consoles, even the GO, which I guess is still a current console, you've got the side-by-side macros, and there you see the red and green, and to me it just logically makes sense so much of the time, where I've got like increment and decrement or complementary buttons, right? Timecode silent and timecode learn, timecode enable, timecode disable, learn on, learn off. And this is probably a good example of where you've got macros that are complementary or logically paired up in a way that having them right next to each other makes a lot of sense. So feature request for the next flagship console is to have two sets, like pairs of OLEDs would be amazing. Just the way I can imagine using those would be awesome. But yeah, physical targets are huge. Time code there. Let's cover this really quick too, as far as manipulating time code for storing. So a couple ways you can do this, and we'll take up the last 10 minutes on this maybe, which is dance recitals. I do a ton of dance recitals, some of which are time coded out. Probably the most common way I do it currently is I have a cue list for every dance recital, or not every dance recital, but for every dance. And I pair my cue lists with my event lists. So event list 10 is tied with cue list 10, and that is song 10 in the recital. And so I keep those paired up really nicely in that regard. And those work great when your starting cue and your ending cue is always going to resolve the same, which in dance recital it is. And that could be everything from a blackout to a blue out to maybe it's stage lights up for some of the recitals we do. We'll actually end not even in a blue out, but like stage lights are full up and full bright, where like the dance choreographer comes out on stage and either usually announces the next routine. So I've done all variations of that, and when they're always starting and ending the same, you can safely have them all on cue lists. And then again, we have audio send out timecode for these. CuePoints is the one I use the most often, and it automatically adds the striped timecode to it. So the sound department just has to load in all 24 tracks of audio, and they assign the timecode number that each audio track should play, and they hit play, and it's sending me timecode. And it will jump from cue list to cue list as necessary. So that works really good. In House of Worship, I do a bunch of House of Worship work as well. And there we've got just a giant library of, say, 40 songs that we're rotating through. And for those, we don't, because we seamlessly transition from song to song, we don't hold them in different cue lists because we really want to add nuance to transition from song 1 to song 2. And so because of that, I don't bounce between cue lists for those, but I do use cue lists as my archive. And so I'll show you an example of how I manage that here. So here I'm going to take cue 0.5 through 109.01, copy 2 twice, which is move 2, and now I'm going to move that to cue list 2.5. And so now cue list 0.5, we don't show the time code, but we do see down here that event list 1, sure enough, knows that it's in cue list 2 and will trigger cue list 2. That could have some unexpected side effects. So then what I do, so we've now moved the cues. Now I'll go into the show control, and I'll take 1/1 through whatever our last is here, so 6. And then copy 2 to get move 2, and I'll move that to list 2/. And again, because event lists auto number, I don't even need to put a number in there. I can just move that block of events into a new cue list unnumbered. And now in cue list 2, we've got all of those time codes. And by default, it's going to set time code to SMPTE and internal and external to off. So even though it gets that time, because that cue list is disabled, it's not going to act upon that. And so now when I go back to event list 1, there's nothing. If I go to cue and I go to cue list 1, you'll see, minimize the CI, we're starting at cue 902. And so I'm going to have to go to cue list 2/5, and I can find all my cues in here. And you'll see that I moved it to 0.5. Let me go back into show control and go to 2/1. And you can see show control is stored by reference. So it knows that those have been renumbered and it renumbers them appropriately. And so that's how I move out. And then to move in is just the opposite. And so I'll go to cue list 2/5 through, and then I'll copy 2. Let's move on the command line. And I'll move that back to cue/0.5, and it moves those in. Now when we go to show control, under list 2, it sees that it's back in the main cue list. But again, if I look at event list 1, it's empty. So I've got to go to event list 2/1 through and copy 2 twice. And we're going to move that back into event list 1. And it moves it back in there. And now we're back to exactly where we started. The way I do this for House of Worship or any place where we're moving blocks of songs is I come up with some sort of incrementing system for how we space out songs. And so in my standard convention, and conventions are just massive with everything we do with programming, my convention is 200 cue blocks. And so I have... So I go from cue 100 to 299 is song 1, and then 300 to 499 is song 2, and 500 to 699 is song 3, and so on and so forth. And that just allows me to have enough space in those songs to move around. But then that makes manipulating and moving cues really, really easily, because I know that song 1 is always at 100, song 2 is at 300, song 3 is at 500, so on and so forth. So now when I need to manipulate and move cues around, I'm always just grabbing that block of cues, saying, okay, I need to move song 1 out somewhere and song 2 out somewhere. I'm always grabbing that logical block. I'm not scrolling around the PSD to figure out, okay, where's the start and end of that song? You'll Be Back is at 190.01 through where? 273. And the next song starts at 274. For Hamilton, something that's always going to be done completely logically in a linear top to bottom, this cue numbering makes all the sense in the world to me. I agree with it. However, because we're in the process of moving and swapping and reordering, having things in logical blocks or groups that you manipulate around just makes things so much simpler. Also, this first time I've looked at this show file in a long time, what I do see interesting here is we see, for Here Comes the General, MIDI. And so while it's not included in this show file, I would bet that if we looked at the original show file, you'd see MIDI timecode involved for these, for tightly synchronized songs like that, versus these that are just probably manually called cues. Here, the other option is this, where we see MIDI gunshot, which is, I think, the only one in here. Gunshot, probably literally a MIDI note pushed on a keyboard that fires out that cue. And again, that can come in, and using show control, instead of it being time, it could actually be a MIDI note. Again, not in the timecode realm, but certainly in show control, you can have MIDI notes on a keyboard that trigger cues. And so this one might not be triggered by timecode, but that could be triggered by show control, where if this note is pressed on the keyboard, it triggers that specific cue. So yeah, just some interesting notes here, and certainly the way they label things are interesting, and we could talk a lot about like deconstructing this button MIDI is probably something similar as well. But that is just some information about timecode. Now we're very much at the end of the 2-hour mark. This is part 3 of a series on Nomad, starting literally from zero, starting with empty show files. Again, here we started with a show file that had a stage and some cues, but when it came to timecode, nothing existed for timecode. Like, we did everything from setting up, going through setup for timecode, to building macros from scratch, kind of fuddling our way through that, setting up show control and using that to trigger cues in an existing cue list. We set up Repere from scratch. Other programming software is very similar in the way you get those loaded up as well. So this series is here to help show, like, they're long form live streams of like 2 hours in length, but they let you sit over my shoulders. I talk through exactly how we set these up from zero to fully time-coded functional things. And again, here we're not showing cue creation. That's kind of a real separate subject, and a lot of that is design-oriented, but this is the time coding element. And I get lots of questions from people about how we actually time code things. And so I'm assuming for a lot of you already have cues written, and you just want to figure out, how do we automate this? How do we get these to be time coded? And this is one way. I will throw out, and in the last minute, oh my goodness, do make sure you subscribe. Really in this just for subs and likes, to see that these are valuable to people everywhere from community theaters all the way up as you're growing in your career in this, sharing some of the knowledge I've learned along the way. So please subscribe and like. I really appreciate that. But what I'll say is that even in environments where I don't actually have timecode, but we do have like reliable triggers. So there is a kids environment I work in where they're literally just playing back a video track, right? So there's a video that they're playing on projector screens, and we're synchronizing lights to the video, but that system has no provision for timecode or outputting. It is a video that we have. and I'll probably do a separate video at this at one point, but literally I'll do this entire setup I just did. So I'll just bring the video into Reaper, which will just play the audio tracks of it. I'll set up a MIDI track so that we're getting MIDI timecode in, write my cues like I write. I'll do everything exactly like what you said you see here. And the only difference is we don't use external, we use internal. And so what we have on our end is a macro, and the macro triggers both the video playout system outside of the scope of what we're doing here, but triggers the video playout system, and it triggers the lighting cues. And literally the macro looks something like, let's see if I can do this cold. I'm going to create macro 1, and what we're going to do is we're going to say, maybe we're going to make sure we're starting from a clean place, that we're going to go to cue out. And then what we're going to do is we're going to say event 1/ and then we're going to go internal, or we're going to say time 0, and then I'm going to go event 1/ and then internal enable. And let's see, is that everything I need? I think it is. And then maybe just to be especially sure, because I tend to do this, I don't trust the state anything is in, so I always want to explicitly put it in here. So I'll say silent mode disable, just to make sure we're not in silent mode. And so there we go, there's macro 1. And so now, go back into live, and it doesn't matter where we're at. If I go and play macro 1, watch what happens. If I did everything right, hopefully I did. 1, timecode starts rolling, it triggers the first cue, and then, let's see, oh, we're not triggering. Why are we not triggering? Let's see. So first of all, let's try timecode event not found. Oh, because we probably didn't move our, so we're going to, let's take a look here. 1/1. We've got timecode events in there. Oh, okay. I see why. Okay, so here's the mistakes. We set timecode to 0, so it's starting from 0. But if you remember, we are supposed to be in hour 1. 0 minutes, 0 seconds, and 0 frames. So now we've got the timecode set properly. And then we're just going to label this test. And then the other thing here is that my enable and disable is only enable and disabling external. So let's add those right now. Event 1/ internal enable. And then event 1 internal disable. And then we'll make sure that shows foreground, and we, okay, so now if I hit macro 1, first of all, let's go snapshot 1. When I do macro 1, there we go. So now we're sitting in Q 0.5 because we're actually rolling time from hour 1 instead of hour 0, which was my mistake there. And then now you see that it rolls. So that's exactly the setup I use in one of the kids' environments I deal with, where they're playing a video and we don't exactly have the ability to send MIDI timecode or SMPTE or anything. The video playout system only does stereo, so we need both left and right for that. In some environments, you could get away with like left being for the main speakers and the right channel sending timecode to lighting. Like you could do that infrastructure, but to show you, you don't even need to. Like if you've got a video that reliably, when you hit play, plays at the right time, what you do is you just synchronously free play both of them. And so the only thing you're not seeing in here is in this macro is perhaps as part of macro 1 is at the very top, we might be sending an OSC command to our video playout system to play the video. And that's probably the only thing that's missing from here is that command, or vice versa. You have the video playout system send an OSC command to lighting to say, hey, trigger macro 1. And then as soon as you do that, we're off to the races following timecode. And lighting and video can play back synchronously in free run. So they're going to be close within frames of each other. And you can tweak and adjust. And one of the ones I think I have to do, I think it's a 300 millisecond offset. So when we play video and we play lighting, the cues are off by 300 milliseconds. So we go do our programming routine, and then we add 300 milliseconds to all of our time codes so that it plays back synchronized. So time code's even available if you don't have MIDI time code, if no way to get time code properly into the lighting console, you can just use a free run like we're showing here. We program it using real time code, just so that way we can take our audio and we can jump around the timeline and make sure our cues are firing when and where and how we want them to. But then our final product is they just free run. And so I've been doing that in a handful of environments for several years, and it works well. Again, not as perfect as getting actual striped timecode to all venues, but there you go. That's a little bonus on how to timecode non-timecodable things, or maybe things that aren't incapable of giving us timecode. We can still timecode. If they're doing something reliable, we can timecode to it. Yeah, there it is. Hopefully that was helpful. All right. Have a great day, everybody.